Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and on this week's episode, let's talk about the new iPhone X. Is it just a gimmick, or could it be a professional video camera?
Plus, we solve your filmmaking math problems, what causes moire, and whether it's fair use to film a sporting event.
Hello, Panda Bear Nick.
Hello, Mr. Hammond. How are you?
For our audio listeners, you couldn't tell that Nick did that intro as a, what do you call that thing? It's
You
like
call
a
it
Face
an
ID?
Emoji.
Oh, yeah.
It's like an emoji, but it's animated.
Oh, so it's not animal emoji. It's animated.
Oh, that was my assumption, but I could be wrong.
Maybe it's both. It's a double entendre. So before we even talk about if the iPhone camera is great or could be used as a professional camera, we just need to talk about Face ID, because you were shooting that with the front-facing camera.
That is correct.
And if I understand it, it wasn't actually using video at all for that. It's just using the infrared tracking data.
Yeah, my understanding is, so the iPhone X has a front regular camera, like you'd expect, but then it also has an infrared flood lamp, it has an infrared dot projector, which projects all these dots all over your face, and it has an infrared camera to read that infrared data. And so it's actually using those dots to track exactly what your face looks like, so you can unlock your phone with your face and also do this fun 3D animation face tracking stuff, which is kind of cool.
You're talking about the like portrait lighting, or that doesn't even require the infrared dots, does it? Because that also works on the back camera.
This Animoji requires the dots, right? Because it's tracking all the different features of your face and mapping that to this animated character.
Well, yeah, I guess I assumed that for like the 3D kind of, or the true depth portraiture stuff, my first thought was that it needs that 3D data, but I guess it doesn't. Because you can do it on the other camera as well.
Well, I think it does use it because on the back camera, it's using the fact that there are two cameras to determine levels of depth. But on the front camera, it's using this infrared method to determine depth because there's only one camera. And that's how it's able to do like the fake background blurring and things like that.
Have you done that fake background? Have you done that stuff, the portrait, like studio lighting on both cameras yet?
I have, yeah.
I wonder, like, does the infrared technique work any better than the two-camera technique?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't done enough of it to really tell you, but I think if the lighting is good and you have enough separation between the background and the subject, they both work surprisingly well. Like, I use portrait mode a ton to take pictures. I think it looks really good.
Are you doing it just to, like, blur the background or make the background a little bit darker, or are you doing the full, like, stage lighting effect where it throws the background, it just turns it black?
I mean, obviously I've played with that a little bit. I prefer just the blurred background, I think. They do have one, I think they call it studio lighting, and all it does is it kind of makes it look like you've got like a gold bounce card and, you know, off to the side and just fill in the face a little bit more. It's really a nice effect. I haven't done a ton with those really dramatic ones. Sometimes they end up looking a little strange if the depth information isn't quite right, like you lose part of the person's head or hair or something.
Right.
But I'm sure there will be situations where that turns out nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed in some sample photos how like a woman's ponytail or braid on the top of her head can turn blurry. So I imagine in stage lighting effect, it would just turn that, it would just get rid of that.
Yeah.
Like part of your hair could disappear.
And just to nerd out a little bit, I've got the iPhone X right here, and I got the white version, which I've never gotten a non-black iPhone before. But because there's basically no bezel on this, you know, on the other older iPhones, if you got a colored phone, the top and bottom would be white, which I hated on the front of the phone.
Yeah.
But this doesn't have that. So I got the, I guess they call it silver, with the kind of chromish trim, and I think it looks kind of like an old iPod and very classic, and I like it a lot. It's very cool. Expensive phone, though.
So you sent me... Yeah. Well, you always get the most expensive, and we'll talk in a minute about some of the choices you made, like
that doesn't
size
sound good.
and everything.
That doesn't sound
good.
Let's talk about the choices you've made, Nick. The poor choices you've made in your life.
But I appreciated you sending me. You sent me some videos out there. People have already taken infrared cameras and filmed the Face ID process, which was an idea that as soon as Apple announced what they were doing with infrared, I was like, oh, I got to film this with my camera. I haven't even yet gotten my hands on an iPhone 10, and people have already made better videos.
Yeah, it was funny. I was chatting with Griffin. He's like, oh, you should send it to me so I can take cool video of the infrared dots with my infrared camera. And like 2 minutes later, I sent him a video to The Verge, who had done just that with a really cool video. It's like, you're way too late, buddy. Way too late.
Yeah.
But it was cool. We'll link to that video in the show notes, because that was cool, seeing all the crazy dots projected on their face. So
Face ID is like the thing that interests me the most, but it really does nothing for the video world.
That's true. We could turn this into an iPhone show, but I think there's enough podcasts out there about that.
So I guess right off the bat, is there anything, picking up an iPhone 10, is there anything that you think makes it a better video camera than before?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, so it has the dual cameras that the Plus iPhone cameras have had in the past. So it has a wide-angle lens and a telephoto lens.
So that means when you're shooting video, do you have two different options in focal length, really?
You have two focal length options, and you can just hit a button and cut between them, which is nice. In the past, the wide-angle lens has been optically stabilized with OIS, but the telephoto lens has not. And in the iPhone 10...
that's the one that would need it more.
Exactly. The iPhone 10, they have optical image stabilization, and I think the aperture on the telephoto lens has always been a little smaller. I think it was an f2.8. Don't quote me on these numbers, but it went from like an f2.8 to an f2.4. So it lets in more light, and it's stabilized now. So you should be able to use the telephoto lens in a lot more situations where before you would have to fall back to the wide angle that was stabilized and let in more light. So that's very cool.
Yeah, you're right about the telephoto being an f2.4, and the wide angle is an f1.8, which I think they've had ever since the iPhone 7. They upgraded the aperture back then. But the image stabilization has always been good on these cameras, so I assume they do a nice job with it here.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've always, I think, done some digital image stabilization on top of the optical, but the optical is really going to help you in those low light situations where, you know, digital stabilization doesn't help you at all with low light. It just helps, you know, smooth out your camera movements. So
I wonder, you were already a Plus user, so I suppose this is actually the screen size is going down for you, or it's relatively similar. But for me, I still have an iPhone 6S, so I'm using a smaller screen. Does having a larger screen make shooting photos or video any easier?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're going to see more. Now, the aspect ratio of this screen, it's very tall and narrow. So when you're looking at a full 4:3, it may not make that much of a difference compared to your 7, unless you do some cropping or things like that. But for me...
What happens when you shoot 16:9? Does it have two black bars on the left and right?
That's a good question. Let's look. How do you shoot 16:9?
Probably go into video mode, right? Are you in photo mode?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm dumb. Yep, it widens up, but it still has black bars on the front and left. It actually kind of looks like an iPhone 7.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
So this camera can do 4K 60p, which when I heard that I was like, oh no. It's like that's what the GH5, that was like its defining characteristic. It can also do 1080 at 240 frames per second, so that's
very
better
fast.
than the GH5.
Yeah, it's double.
In fact, what was the video you sent me? It was from F-Stoppers. Essentially, he was making the argument that the iPhone stacks up pretty well to a GH5.
Yeah, I mean, he basically, and we'll link to this, Lee Morris at F-Stoppers had what I thought was a really cool video about comparing the iPhone 10 to the GH5.
Which, of course, like, commenters thought was ridiculous. Like, everyone was like, what are you talking about? There's no way it's a professional camera.
Well, and that's not what he's saying, but he's saying, let's compare the quality you can get with what you've got in your pocket. And I thought it was a really cool test. In very well-lit situations, you know, outdoors and stabilized, I think the iPhone looked pretty good. Now, when you punch in, you can definitely see that the GH5 has more detail. But, of course, the GH5 just blows it out of the water once you're indoors and don't have, you know, perfect sunlight.
And the big difference being you can put lenses on a GH5. I mean, I think I noticed in his tests, I think he was using fairly small apertures so that he could get a similar like quality of image. Like, you can't get bokeh with a tiny sensor on the iPhone very easily.
Yep. But it's nice to know that, I think in a pinch, for certain kinds of shots, you could easily use, an iPhone and cut it into a professional project and people wouldn't know, in the appropriate situations.
Yeah, I've definitely used an iPhone as a third camera, like mounted it somewhere. I mean, I think you have to act professional with that camera. Put it on a tripod if you can, light it if you can, do all the things that you should do, and you'll get a great result. Which I think is so funny that people in the comments always say things like, oh, no, the iPhone's not a professional camera. And then people are even arguing, like, even the GH5, that's not a professional camera. If you're really a professional, you'd be shooting with a Red. And I just think, like, when is this argument about whether or not a camera is professional? I think I saw someone in the comments said, like, my grandmother uses a Lumix GH5. That means it's not professional. It's like, the camera is never what makes something professional. If you think that... then like you're probably not doing a great job of, like, you're the professional. I think you make a good video or not, and the camera is a tool that helps you get there.
I agree. I think no matter what camera you put in my hands, my results will not be professional. Whereas you could probably shoot, with a 10-year-old camera and do some pretty great things. Yeah.
Well, and I thought about it for a minute. And I thought, we always compare things like sharpness and resolution and frame rates when we're talking about, like, how does an iPhone stack up? But I think in practice, my experience with shooting with an iPhone, trying to shoot a professional project only with an iPhone, I think the real limitations you run into are, like, there's no removable media. So, how big is the phone you bought?
256 gigs.
So that's the max you can get.
That's the biggest
size
one. So they have 64 or 256, and I had a 128 gig phone, which was plenty, but 64 would be way too tight for me, especially shooting 4K video. So
256 actually would be pretty good. You might not fill that up too quickly,
right?
Because I think I've shot on older phones where I'm like every 20 minutes on a shoot having to offload footage so that I have room to keep shooting.
Yep. And for just day-to-day shooting, I've got iCloud photo library, so it offloads that stuff to the cloud and kind of automatically cleans up, so I always have free space.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
And what about battery life? I would imagine if you're shooting 4K video, you're probably, like, if you're trying to use this on a professional project, I imagine you'd run through battery pretty quickly.
I would think so. I haven't actually shot much 4K with it yet, so I can't tell you how it impacts battery life. I have been pretty impressed with the battery life overall. But yeah, I would think shooting 4K is going to really drain it pretty quick.
Yeah. One thing I was curious about is, can you also do that studio lighting stuff in video, or is that only a photo?
Only
feature?
In photo, yeah. I think it's it can do the compute. So you do get a live preview when you're shooting photos, so it is keeping up in real time.
Yeah.
But the effects are not available in video mode, which it would just be, I think, too much computation still.
Right.
But
if they can get there, I guess if they can get the processing power,
it's just a function of processing power, and that'll be cool.
That would set it apart from video cameras. I mean, if people could do those kind of effects in an iPhone, you're not gonna be able to do that in a GH5. That might actually make for a fun music video or something.
Exactly. Neat stuff. Computational photography. People always said, how eventually SLRs will never go away because physics, but those processors sure can do a lot.
Yeah. Well, I just keep thinking eventually we're going to have cameras that just collect kind of like a Lytro camera, like collect all the light data.
Just collect the data of the environment and you can rebuild it however you want, right?
Right. I mean, it might even be like a 360 camera where it's just looking in every direction, sending out lasers, mapping everything, collecting light information, and you can pick your focal lengths and focus later.
Let's start a Kickstarter for our laser cameras.
For the amazing future camera we don't know how to build. Give us your money now.
And then we'll figure it out. Science is fun.
Yeah.
What else?
In just a moment, we're answering your questions about filmmaking math, what causes moire, and whether it's fair use to film a sporting event.
Hey Indie Filmmakers is brought to you by Tongle, the creative network where anyone, anywhere has the opportunity to make content for brands and get paid.
So we're getting near the end of the year, and we're getting closer to the deadline for this Tongle project they're doing called the YouTube Pilot Portal. now through the end of the year, they are taking your ideas for content that could live on their YouTube channel. They want to build out their YouTube channel with content that would be good for a filmmaking audience. So you can pitch a project, and if they pick your project, you're essentially making a pilot that could lead to more work and lead to you getting paid. So you should definitely check that out at tongle.com.
Yeah, you can get all the details by visiting tongle.com/projects. That's TONGAL.com/projects.
Nick, I think of our 7 questions we're going to answer today, I believe the first 4 are all essentially math problems.
Oh boy. Okay.
Let's see how we do.
Let's get this ready.
So our first question is a YouTube comment from Abacus Media, who loves the show, thank you. And he shot some footage with a GH5 using the SLR Magic 2X anamorphic lens. So he's already shooting an extra wide anamorphic image. And he wanted to get the most quality, so he shot that in the full 4:3 mode, the anamorphic mode on the GH5.
Yep.
And now he needs to de-squeeze it in Final Cut. And at this point, he's just like, this is too much math. I don't even know what I've ended up with.
Well, you asked the right person. Griffin Hammond loves this stuff.
Well, so I think he wants to end up with a 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio, which is kind of standard anamorphic size. But I guess you do want to start with what is the final aspect ratio you want, because I think there are various different ones. I think we've talked about how, like, on Netflix, they have kind of a split the difference between that
16 by 9 and...
Yeah. So I guess figure out what that ratio is you want to hit, and then you can do the math to get there.
Okay.
But if he's doing 4:3 in anamorphic mode, if you just divide 4 divided by 3, you get an aspect ratio of 1.33333. And if we multiply that by 2, because he was using a 2x adapter, I mean, really, that's all you need to do in post. You shot it with a lens that compressed everything in half. So in post, you just need to double your horizontal resolution. Just take the X axis and double it, and don't mess with the Y axis. Those pixels should stay the same. So you'll end up with an aspect ratio that's 2.67 to 1.
2.6 repeating? Thank you?
Yeah. So you are ending up with a wider image than I think the final aspect ratio you want.
So we just crop in wherever you want?
Yeah, I think you just crop in. So I think you would make a 2.35 to 1 project, if that's the timeline size you want, and then just take that footage, double the width, and you'll have some black bars unless you punch in the thing. I guess you...
So you just set that crop to 100%. It might fit it automatically in Final Cut, and you just go in and say no, blow it up to 100%, and then you'll have the ability to move the frame around. Is that right? Yeah.
I guess the problem is, I imagine some of the math he's doing is trying to figure out the resolutions that he's like he shot in this. I don't even remember what the resolution coming out of the camera is.
Well, what good are you? Get this info.
But see, I think he can make it simple by deal with that incoming resolution and then just double just whatever that
the X
horizontal
Y
resolution
we leave alone.
is.
The X,
yeah,
we double. Easy peasy.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we made it harder.
We've got a YouTube comment from Warren. He says, "Wow, I noticed moving sparkles on Asden's black foam at the 336 mark."
So he's watching my microphone.
Your microphone comparison video. He thinks it's called moire, and it's only visible when he's on 1440p HD on YouTube. What causes the moire on the GH5, and what's the best way to eliminate it?
So immediately, I think he's saying he only sees it in a certain YouTube mode, which makes me think it's not the camera's fault. It's not the camera that's introducing the moire here. It's actually YouTube.
The compression, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not the compression. It's the fact that he's watching it not in its native resolution.
Oh, yes.
Because what causes moire is really, if you just think about, imagine a screen door, like that mesh on a screen door. Mm-hmm. And if you had 2 screen doors together and you move them, you get that optical effect. You get the moire effect in real life. So just any time you move two grids across each other, like two pieces of mesh, you get that weird
and so
moire effect.
In this analogy, one of the grids is the black foam, and the other one is the downscaling of the resolution in his browser.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're watching a 4K video and you're watching it at like 1.5 the resolution, YouTube has essentially made a grid where they're dropping out many of the pixels that I shot. And that grid moving over the other pattern on the microphone is what's causing that moire.
So I currently am wearing a shirt with a very kind of small hatch mark type pattern. It might not be a great pattern to wear for YouTube videos. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, if you move around, yeah, it may cause some moire. I'm also wearing some stripes, but I think mine are broad enough that they shouldn't cause that problem. But I'm sure if someone chooses to watch this in like a weird half resolution, it may cause some of that. So you can't always get rid of it in every viewer's experience on the internet because their computer may introduce their own thing. I think you just want to try to eliminate it as much as you can in the camera, because if I'm getting in the camera, then everyone's going to see it. And luckily the GH5 is pretty good with moire.
Makes sense.
Here's a tweet from Sam Mason, who is wondering if upscaling to 4K is a good thing to do if he shot 1080 video. He actually is wondering if this will like help him get a higher bit rate for posting on the internet. What do you think?
That is a great question. I just, off the cuff, would lean towards yes.
Well, I mean, you could make a higher bit rate file that's higher resolution, but I don't think it's going to effectively make the video any better, quality-wise.
Well, I think the question, let me talk through it, and you can tell me why I'm wrong, which I'm sure I am. You have a 1080p video, you upscale it to 4K, and then you upload it to YouTube. YouTube, seeing this is a 4K file, is going to dedicate a higher bit rate to the 4K version than it would to the 1080p version.
Yeah.
But because of the way the compression works, since there's not really more data in that 4K, you might get the benefits of a higher bit rate in other parts of the video. Like you might have fewer compression artifacts or things like that, since it's going to be easy to compress since it was just, you know, upscaled. Any chance that's accurate or no?
I mean, I think, to me, it just sounds like you're always going to get better quality on YouTube if you upload higher bit rate. And I mean, the bit rate coming out of the camera is maybe 100 megabits or something.
I think the question, though, is about the delivery bit rate from YouTube to the user. Do you see what I'm saying?
I guess I don't quite follow.
In conclusion, we don't know.
I mean,
I think it's possible that it could.
Yeah.
Griffin disagrees.
I generally think you can, like, 1080 already looks pretty good. I think if you've shot 1080, you're not going to you're not going to be able to make it look a whole lot better by doing any special thing to it with bitrate or resolution. So
the Hey Indie Filmmakers official answer is, who cares?
So
is that right?
This, I guess that's like it's like on Mythbusters where they're like, well, we don't know. It was not proven or debunked. This email that I got from Josh is actually kind of the opposite question, which I do think I know the answer to. He's wondering if he's thinking that his computers at school are probably not powerful enough to handle editing 4K.
Okay.
So he wants to shoot his next project in 4K and then downscale it to 1080 before he edits, just so that the computers have 4 times less pixels to deal with. And he's just wondering, is that going to be the same as if he edited in 4K and then exported in 1080? Will he get the same result?
I would say yes.
What do you think about that one? Yeah, I do think. I think if he takes the
except for things like color grading and, depending on how much he's modifying the actual image, using the higher quality source material in those situations, I think is beneficial. But if you're just kind of straight cutting, then I think it would be the same.
Right. Yeah, I think just for cutting. Yeah, especially if he were to like zoom in or something in post.
Can I throw out a suggestion? I'm not sure what he's using to edit, but you might try and keep those 4K files and edit in a proxy. If you have a proxy mode, like in Final Cut, you can do proxies of a lower quality. So you can do all your editing on a lower quality thing, but then when you do your final export, it'll go back out to those 4K files and use them.
Right. Well, and I even edited that out of his question. He actually said that he didn't want to deal with proxies. I guess he's just not comfortable with it.
Well, but if you're shooting 4K, it might be worth dealing with proxies. It's just something to look into.
But I think to his point, he knows that he wants his... I think it's not just that he wants to make it easier on these computers. I think he also knows that his output file can be 1080, will be 1080. So maybe he doesn't need to deal with 4K at all. I actually recommended to him that he just shoot the thing in 1080.
I was going to say, if that's the case, shoot in 1080 and just make your life easier with file sizes and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I don't really know why he needs to go through the process of using Handbrake to downscale everything first. I mean, that's just going to be a time-consuming process.
Yep.
I think to your point, if you're not going to do a bunch of effects, then I don't think anyone will see the difference.
We've got an email from Bjarn. Hopefully I said that right. Wondering what your thoughts are about the new MacBook Pro. I really want to buy one to work with Final Cut Pro 10, but I don't really know which one is good enough. Do I need a 13-inch or a 15-inch with a better GPU if we look at the future with 4K video?
This is actually the same question that I have. I'm actually like thinking this week, Nick, if I should get a new MacBook Pro. Mine that I have is still the one that I edited Sriracha on 4 years ago, and it's starting to get
a little creaky, a little old.
Yeah. And Bjarn calls it a new MacBook Pro, and it is semi-new, but they did come out with it in June, right?
Yeah, earlier mid 2017. That's pretty new.
Yeah.
I think
so. We're kind of in that like middle, like maybe you should buy, but you may also want to wait another 6 months or something. They may come out with something else.
So I am using a 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro. I have the one without a touch bar. I've got 8 gigs of RAM and a 512 SSD is the configuration I have. It works fine for my editing purposes. I have done 4K with it, and it works pretty well. I think if you're doing editing all day, every day, I would probably think about the 15-inch for 2 reasons. One, like he says, it does have a dedicated GPU, which is going to accelerate the editing workflow, especially for effects and color correcting and things like that. And the 15 inches offer quad-core processors, which are a big deal when dealing with video. The 13 inches only have dual-core, and I think you're going to want the extra cores for a professional editing rig. So I would say the 13-inch will work, and it's way cheaper, so that's what I've got. And if that's what you can afford, that's fine. But if you're going to spend the cash and really want what's best, look at the 15 inches and get quad-core processor for sure.
Yeah, I see the 13 inches start at $12.99, go up to about $17.99. The 15 inches, I think, start around, they start
over
at
$2,000. Yeah, like $2,200 or something. So it's a big jump.
So I probably would get a 15 inch because that's what I have now, and I'll like having the same screen size. And I think I'll notice that the new ones are way thinner than my 4-year-old one, so it'll already feel much smaller. I guess my question is, it looks like it comes in 2.8 gigahertz, 2.9 gigahertz, and 3.1. Does that matter much?
I wouldn't worry about that as much.
So like I could go with a 2.8 and I'd be pretty happy, you think?
Yeah. You want 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, if you're going to spend the money, get 16 gigs of RAM and get the biggest SSD you can. More
right,
important than the megahertz of the processor.
I think I noticed I could upgrade to like 500 gigs or 1 terabyte. I think I would want the 1 terabyte.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that means I'm going to spend a bunch of money.
Yes, you are. Congratulations.
Here is a tweet that we got from Paul Robertson to our Hey.film podcast Twitter account, wondering what is the copyright constraint for filming sporting events and posting highlights to YouTube? Are we covered by fair use? What is your initial thought?
No. I don't know. My guess is no, but I don't know why I say that, and I'm not sure.
What kind of event are you imagining he's going to? What do you think he means by this question?
Oh, I'm thinking like a professional sporting event, like NFL or basketball game or something where it's nationally televised, and I don't know. You have No, I'm changing my answer. Yes.
You think you are? I mean,
probably again depends how much you. No, they don't have a copyright on anything you shoot. I think you could live stream a whole NFL game from your seat as long as you didn't agree to a contract when you bought the tickets that says you can't. I don't think copyright law comes into play.
I think you probably did agree to a contract when you bought the ticket,
well,
right?
But that has nothing to do with copyright law, right? Then you're talking contract law, so fair use has no bearing.
Well, I think the way that fair use would probably come into this is the moment you go into a stadium and you are live streaming a game, now you are competing with their product and you're hurting the market for their product.
But they don't have a copyright on their game, do they?
I think they do, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like a different, they are shooting a different product, so it is like a different copyright, like they're shooting it with their own cameras and everything. But I do think that there's surely a fair use argument there because you are hurting the market for their product.
We need a lawyer we can like call up, like a guest lawyer who jumps on the show.
I mean, I know from my experience that they do stop you from bringing professional video equipment into
which is their right.
stadiums.
I'm just saying, I think absent any contractual obligation not to shoot, it's a different copyright. When you take a picture, you own the copyright to it, regardless of what you're taking a picture of.
You're right, yeah.
Right?
But I do know that people, these sports organizations will send takedown notices for that kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. But you're right. Maybe it's not a copyright and fair use argument. It's just a, like, you're not allowed to do that here argument.
Yeah.
But there would be some places where fair use could protect you, like in a newsy way. I mean, if there's news value to what you're capturing, you might be able to get away with it. And especially, I think, if you can avoid hurting the market for their product too much. Like, if something happened on the field and it was really newsworthy and you captured it, I think you probably could get away with posting that. They may try to take it down, but you might have a good argument for keeping that up, especially if you weren't live streaming the whole game. Now, I think it gets easier if you are doing like a high school game.
Yeah.
Or something. But I think in either case, if you're acting like a news person, essentially, I think you need to be getting permission to do what you do. I mean, you could always make a news argument that there's a news value for you being there and it's your First Amendment right, but you're always going to be better off asking people if it's okay to do this. And I think especially if you're making money off of it, that's where you're going to get a lot of pushback. But I remember I mean, I've done this a lot where I've gone into stadiums and had to film something for my job.
Yeah.
And I've generally tried to avoid gameplay because I know they're strict about that. Like, the stories I might tell in a stadium have to do with the audience. And I also felt like when I was working in news, I could kind of get away with it. Like, maybe a regular person shouldn't be doing this, but I'm a journalist, so I kind of have some protection for that kind of thing.
Interesting.
But I'm also being conscious of, I don't want to shoot something that's going to make the NFL mad or, you know, to interfere with their product that they're selling.
You're worried Roger Goodell's going to show up on your doorstep.
But I definitely have had to like sneak stuff into stadium security. Sometimes I've just tried multiple different security checkpoints. Like, this one said, like, you can't bring that telephoto lens in here, and then I'd go to the next one. And they're okay.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right, our final question today is an email that I got from Tom, and he showed this Christmas animation that he sent me. I'll put a link to it in the show notes at Hey.film. It's a cool 3D animation of, like, Santa flying, like, first person flying his sleigh. And a lot of people have been interested in this over the years, and he's been able to license it. Once someone even licensed it, just a frame of it for like a greeting card. He got $100 just for that. And this year, I mean, he made this video 2 years ago, but even this year he's getting more inquiries. And one of the companies that wants to license it from him is making it on behalf of a nonprofit client.
Okay.
And so he says he's making a video with no budget, and he's approached Tom wondering if he can incorporate this thing. So he's just wondering what my philosophy is on licensing and if it makes any difference that it's going to be for a nonprofit.
Griffin's philosophy is squeeze those nonprofits for everything they got. True?
No. I mean, Tom is right. In his email, he points out that, like, regardless of the fact that this is a nonprofit, he still worked hard to make this thing, and it still has value. So I wouldn't just give it to them for free just because they're making the video for free. But I do like to think about what is a fair licensing value, and a lot of what goes into my thinking is how much I paid for archival footage for Sriracha. That it cost me $2,250 to license 30 seconds of archival footage. And I always thought that was too much. So anytime someone asks me for Sriracha footage, I make sure I'm not anywhere near that price tag. So a lot of times I've licensed things for maybe like 30 seconds of footage or a minute of footage for around $500. But I definitely have licensed it for less for projects that were nonprofit, or, you know, if a school wants to show my film, I usually just give it to them for free.
Yep.
But I try to make it clear, like, what the boundaries are. Especially anytime I'm giving away something for free or really cheap, I try to let them know, like, this is for a one-time screening. You can't be selling tickets to this. You know, are you fundraising off of this or something like that? Changes things. So I guess I would figure out exactly how they want to use it, but just come up with a rate that you think you would be willing to pay.
I always think of a talk that I watched online as a video of it. I think I've talked about it before. It's Mike Montero, and it's F you, pay me. Except he doesn't say F, he says the whole thing. It's a really good talk, and it kind of helps navigate contracts and how this kind of stuff works. Maybe a little bit more focused on designers and things like that, but I think a lot of it applies. So we'll put that in the show notes too.
And I'd be clear, like, maybe ask this guy some more questions if you need to, but the client is nonprofit, and he says he's making them a no-budget video. But does that mean he is spending no money, or he says he wants to spend no money, but the nonprofit is actually going to pay him for his work to make the video? I mean, anywhere else he turns, if he wants music, he's going to have to pay for it. If he wants stock video, he's going to have to pay for it. And maybe some people are willing to give him a discount, but just, I wouldn't give away your work for free.
F you, pay me.
Unless you, like, love this nonprofit and you think what they're doing is really worthwhile and you want to essentially gift them the footage.
Maybe you could write it off.
Yeah, maybe it could be a donation.
But yeah, I would only do that if it's something you would, like, donate your own money to. Just because they're nonprofit doesn't necessarily mean it's something you have to feel obligated to give your stuff for free to.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's our questions for this week.
We did it again.
See,
I'm going to go enjoy my iPhone 10.
And I think I have a plan for next week's episode. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So next week is Thanksgiving week. And I was thinking we should talk about syncing audio. We've gotten lots of questions about that. Oh. And especially syncing audio when you're on the go with, I'm going to be traveling, so I'm not going to be able to travel with all my audio gear.
That'll be fun. I'm going to be not traveling. People are traveling to me. And I will be cooking a turkey. I'm in charge of the turkey. Wish me luck.
All right, well, we'll see you all next week for Thanksgiving.
We'll talk to you later. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Griffin, in the audio recording, I'm about to record the FaceTime. Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.